Today, we're looking at a blue-black ink from Graf von Faber Castell, Midnight Blue. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, there's timestamps down below, but if you've got the time, I would appreciate you checking out the entire video. If you'd like, you can follow me over on Instagram as an ink guy. Also, if you're new here, I do fountain pen ink reviews daily, so I would invite you to subscribe. In order to make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into this Jinhao 51A with a fine nib, used it to write for a day, and wrote my notes for this video. This first writing sample is done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. Additional papers will show up later. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, and to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, no real shading. There's a couple lighter spots, and that's about it. Like, the bottom of the B has a little bit lighter spot. Between the H and the T, a little bit lighter spot. Not anything that actually means something. Now, the extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, and lots of shading spots. A lot of them. Brown goes from very dark to much lighter. Over starts from very light to much darker. Dog, the bottom of the D is much lighter than the top of the D. The O for 10 goes from light to dark to light to dark. Very nice shading throughout. 10 seconds to dry. Now the medium is about the same tone as the extra fine, with no feather spread, halo sheen, and a lot of shading. Yeah, we can see how this is going to go for resistance already. A lot of shading. Like if you look at the, starts as a nice mid-tone, works its way very dark. Got to ignore these areas where it's smudged all over for having a drop. Jumps, starts light, works its way dark. Quick, starts dark, goes to mid-tone, goes to very dark again. Scrubby of the extra fine doesn't show a ton of color variation, but you do get some. Scrubby of the medium shows some, and we do get some from decent color variation, in fact. Tomoe River. No bleeding, normal Tomoe River ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is the same tone as the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. 18 seconds to dry. The medium is the same tone as the extra fine and the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. 23 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us no color variation. We didn't expect it and we didn't get it. Rhodia dot pad. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is a bit lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, quite a few shading spots throughout. Again, because it's a darker ink, you really do see it with the much darker areas. Like the top of the F is lighter than the bottom loop of the F. And the X is much darker than the O. The BR in brown is much darker than the W. Even the B itself starts much lighter and gets much darker. So there is a lot of character that can be found within the writing here. 12 seconds to dry. Now medium's base tone is actually a little bit lighter than the extra fine, with no feather spread, halo sheen, and because it gets even lighter, more shading. Like the T is much lighter than the he. Quick starts dark, goes to mid-tone, goes to very dark at the K. On the brown, it starts light, and in the downstroke gets very dark, and then becomes a lighter writing throughout. And Fox starts light and gets dark. Beautiful shading here. It's one of the reasons I very much enjoy blue blacks. 17 seconds to dry. Now the extra fine scrubby doesn't show a whole lot of color variation. Left to right, it is there. The medium shows more, especially left to right. And I think we got to see all of that color variation in the writing. I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see this kind of muted purple at the top. At the bottom. This muted purple that it creates a line of permanence on the bottom, and it's immediately bonded with the filter paper, and the purple pushes up, and then we get this very nice bright blue. The one on the right, I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. Now that purple line across the bottom is now looking much darker, much more there. It's really, with 10 minutes, managed to bond with the paper. It does push a little bit up, leaving some gray as it's pushing up, and then that bright blue. It just means I'm expecting the blue to wash out and be left with that kind of purple tone. Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, I'm not sure if I would use this as a note taker. There's enough blowout in the writing that I just don't feel comfortable that I don't lose something important to me. The amount of blowout, blurriness, and feathering, I don't use it as a note taker. Water's not doing a whole lot to this ink. Yes, it's lifting all of its darkest tones. It's getting most of that out of the way. It's very obvious where the water was. It's not moving a lot of it. Pen flush does more than water does, but you really see a lot of those purples from the chromatography still there, still in the paper. If you're going to work with the pen flush for this, be patient, really give it some scrubbing before you go to the 1/3 bleach solution. Now, 1/3 bleach solution completely obliterates it, lifts it entirely off the page. And that was only 30 seconds, so it shouldn't take much using it to get it out of your pen if you did use it. If you do use the 1/3 bleach solution, just make sure that you immediately flush your pen with water so you don't rust your metal bits. For the inks I've tested, I've found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. I'm also linking a video that shows how I do my testing and my calculations. Graf von Faber Castell's Midnight Blue has a viscosity of 2.24, making it normal. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. I average all 6 of those numbers. Now, for the inks I've tested, I found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Graf von Faber Castell's Midnight Blue has an average dry time of 16 seconds, making it normal. A good, normal, all-around ink. Instead of finding inks that look like Graf von Faber Castell's Midnight Blue, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. Now, I wanted a nice bright pink to go with this dark blue-black, and I chose Diamine's Flamingo Pink. The second writing sample is done on Apica CD, black and red notebooks, and Franklin Christoph paper. Here we see it on Apica CD notebook paper. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen. It does have spots of shading that you get to see come out. Like the E in blue is a bit darker. The G in midnight is a little bit darker, but not a lot. But there are a few spots you get. The extra fine is a tiny bit lighter than the stub. It has no feather spread, halo sheen, really good shading throughout. Like the T is lighter, the H is darker, the E is a nice mid-tone. Quick starts very dark, goes to mid-tone, goes to very dark, goes to mid-tone, goes to very dark. Beautiful. Brown starts dark, works its way light, 7 seconds to dry. It shows you all the reasons I love blue blacks. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen, and great shading all the way throughout. Just look at the word quick. Starts a very dark on the left side, goes to a mid-tone, the I is very dark, the C goes to mid-tone, the K very dark again. Very nice. Fox starts light at the top, very dark at the bottom, back to light, back to very dark at the X. The shading back and forth in the same word I always love, and only 10 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both, looking far left to far right, shows plenty of color variation. And you know what this ink has? plenty of color variation. Black and red notebooks. No bleeding, no ghosting. One of the reasons black and red notebooks is such a great alternative to some of the more expensive papers, although it's not cheap. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, no shading with the stub. The extra fine is a little bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, and good shading even on this much more absorbent paper. When we look at the word dry, starts very dark, works its way to much lighter on the Y. Brown starts very dark and works its way to good midtones down to the N. Jumps, starts very light, becomes very dark, stays very dark. So it's got nice shading. 6 seconds to dry. Medium, about the same tone as the extra fine, with no feather spread, halo sheen, and good shading. Look at the word dog. Starts light on the bottom, gets very dark into the middle of the word, but the G turns itself from very dark to quite light. Great shading in this writing. 6 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both shows plenty of color variation because this ink has color variation. And Franklin Christoph paper, another more absorbent paper. And when I see inks perform very well with these absorbent papers, it really tells you how strong this ink is in its properties. Now this has no bleeding and no ghosting. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, but the extra fine is a bit lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, and really good shading. Like over starts as a nice mid, becomes a dark tone. Quick starts dark, goes to a mid-tone, gets very dark again. Brown starts very dark and works its way to a mid-tone. All this with only 5 seconds to dry. The medium is about the same tone as the extra fine, with no feather spread, halo sheen, and yes, more great shading. Like dry starts very dark, becomes much lighter on the bottom loop of the Y. Brown is a very dark word that goes to a midtone on the end. Fox starts as a midtone, ends very dark. Dog starts much lighter, ends much darker. 6 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby of the extra fine shows us a little bit of color variation, far left to far right, and we do get it. The medium shows us more color variation, far left to far right, and we get it. That's because this ink brings the shade, and that is all that I have for the writing sample. So what do I think of Graf von Faber Castell's Midnight Blue? As a blue-black, this is fantastic. It is not too blue or too black. It is absolutely perfect in tone. I don't know what else to be able to say on that. What pen and nib would give the best writing experience with this ink? Well, when it's a drier, finer pen, you get a little lighter color. Much wetter pen, it's going to get darker. So it depends on which tone you would prefer. But this is a dealer choice. This is always a good ink. I do new ink reviews every single day. So if you're new here, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching.